period provision of the National Voter Registration Act, which states, the state shall complete not later than 90 days prior to the date of a primary or general election for federal office, any program, the purpose of which is to systematically remove the names of ineligible voters from the official lists of eligible voters. So in other words, you have a law on one side that says you can't do it within 90 days of the election, right? Changing your voter rolls, removing people you might think are ineligible to vote. The other side of it is that a lot of the state officials are saying, well, based on other laws, we're not allowed to certify an election if we believe there are issues, that they need to be legally in charge of the legalities of the election. And if they believe that there's a problem in place, they legally cannot agree to it. They legally cannot accept it. And so you have two different laws. Both are acting within the law, technically, right? But these laws are incompatible. These laws conflict with each other. And based on the fact that laws conflict with each other, it is very likely post-election this is going to become an issue still, and the challenges of it will become things that look at the integrity of votes. At the very least, they might put some pressure on voters, which Democrats are saying is also their problem, right? Because what happens if you have, this is the issue basically. They've made the process of registering to vote easier. Normal safeguards that would prevent a non-U.S. citizen from registering to vote are basically on the individual. Because if you go and apply for a driver's license, it asks you a little prompt on the screen, do you want to register to vote? Are you a U.S. citizen? If an individual wants to be dishonest and say, or they don't understand it, they say, yes, I'm eligible to vote, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen, they're registered to vote. And the check on citizenship is just on them. Now, the question is, if you sometimes have issues of discrepancies between registration within the state and registration at the federal level, and you have some voters who are only registered at the federal level, this is making the states question, well, are these legitimate voters or not? Now, Republicans would say you need to check that. And of course, the federal government does have voter rolls. They actually have the ability to check the citizenship of these voters. The states are requesting a check on the citizenship. The federal government is refusing that because they say based on federal law, you can't wait within 90 days of the election. It's 2 weeks away, and a lot of these were filed within just a few weeks ago. And they're saying that, well, you can't do that. They're saying, well, how can you allow unverified voters if you check it? What does it matter if you remove them or not if they're not supposed to vote anyway? That is the challenge. And that's likely a challenge we're not going to see go away until after the elections. Now, look, it's also likely the Electoral College can become one of the biggest focuses. And if either side wins, that's going to be one of the biggest things we will watch. The Electoral College and the U.S. Constitution defining how states have an equal say at the table, that is going to be one of the core issues. I'll say right now. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break. The elections are just a couple weeks away, November 5th. And with these just around the corner, both Republicans and Democrats are right now preparing for various challenges on the various aspects of the election. Now, look, right now, lawsuits are already coming in throughout the United States. These include issues of mail-in ballots, concerns over voting rolls, and this is very likely the beginning, not the end of it. And now, look, it's also very likely the Electoral College could become a point of focus if either side wins. This is going to be one of the biggest final stages, no matter which side wins the election at first. The Guardian says this. They say, even though the United States touts its status as one of the world's leading democracies, we're a republic, not democracy, but regardless, it says its citizens do not get to directly choose the president. The reason for that is we're a constitutional republic, which again is not a direct democracy. A direct democracy would allow citizens to directly choose the president. Representative democracy, or a republic, is the process we have. Now, look, it notes this. They say that task is reserved for the Electoral College. They say the convoluted way in which Americans have selected their president since the 18th century, during the founding of our country. They say in recent years there's been growing criticism of the Electoral College, accelerated by the fact that two Republican presidents, George W. Bush in 2000 and Donald Trump in 2016, have been elected president while losing the popular vote. But there's no sign that U.S. elections will change anytime soon. Now, look, this is the beginning of the debate, not the end of it, as I've mentioned before. This is going to be one of the big narratives you're going to hear for months. Now, look, the Electoral College is in place throughout, through our Constitution. It's something that is written in the document that constitutes our form of government. Now, the reason it's there, basically allowing each state to have a set number of Electoral College votes. The way it works, every state votes, people vote on who's going to be the next president or whatever else at the federal level. That goes to the certain number of key votes, which then go on the points for that state. Now, like, the reason it's there, it was part of the agreement for smaller states if they were going to enter the federalist system, right? Because America's a unique country. We're not like the UK or Germany or France. We're more like if all of Europe was united into a single country, like the EU, for example. And the way it works is this. Imagine if the European Union wanted to have, a federalist system, right, at the country level, not just all the country level, not just individual states. Well, what would you do? Well, you have a lot of countries, the smaller ones, concerned that they would not actually have a say. Like, what would they get out of it? If, for example, let's say like Luxembourg, a very small country, were to join that type of federalist system, and they believe that Germany, one of the biggest countries, would basically override any vote they could possibly have, what incentive would they have to actually join that type of federalist system? Well, they'd say, well, why would I submit to the wills of your country? What do I get out of this? The American states had the same argument. A lot of smaller states, Rhode Island, others, if they were going to enter the federalist system, they wanted to make sure that they would not be dictated by the two, the biggest states out there, which, now, for example, if we have direct democracy, if we had it so the Electoral College wasn't in place, well, the election would basically be determined by New York and California, and, Texas to an extent. You would have the states with the largest populations basically determining the outcome of elections. To make sure that does not happen, we have, of course, the Electoral College written in our Constitution, which means that they're giving a certain number of Electoral College votes per state based to an extent on population. Some argue that mass migration itself has altered that, because when you start changing the amount of citizens, then you change the amount of representation they get. Now, the technicality with that as well is that since the Electoral College is part of our Constitution, individuals who challenge the Electoral College are technically challenging the Constitution itself, which is debatable on legality anyway, especially from elected officials. But regardless of that, many people also believe that the voices of the individual within America and, the will of the American people are being muffled by it. And that's the, other side of it. Now, look, this likewise leads to challenges in elections. And it's on both sides. Let's be honest with ourselves. Remember, in 2020, Republicans pushed for dueling electors to get two sets of electors on their way to cast their votes to contest the election. Part of that was because you had ongoing legal challenges, and based on the outcome of the legal challenges, they wanted to have an alternate slate of electors in place to vote if the legal challenges swung the other way. Many of them are now facing legal charges themselves because of the way some of the lawsuits and charges worked afterwards. But remember, Democrats also did something very similar. In 2016, right, the previous election, Democrats pushed for faithless electors. And they pushed many members of the Electoral College to switch their votes to Hillary Clinton, even if the state went for Donald Trump. Now, look, it's possible we won't see these types of challenges because of the backlash we've seen since then. Let's be honest with ourselves. Some members of the Electoral College were even facing death threats in 2016, and some of the dueling electors from 2020 are right now, as we speak, facing criminal charges, meaning that it might be deemed too dangerous to make those kinds of challenges. But personally, I think that won't happen because the Electoral College tends to be one of the more contentious political issues when one side wants to challenge the outcome of the vote. I was recently in North Carolina to report on the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. It left a scene of devastation. There were some pretty terrible things.